Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob. Do you know this man?
No, I don't believe I do. Is he related to me or anything? Should I know?
No. He's related to me. In other words, where am I?
Where are you? I think you're in Southern California. Is he the
Correct.
mayor?
This is the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, and he's up for. He's about to lose office there's an election coming up, and he's not running. He's going to not be mayor, and he's nominated to be ambassador to India. This is my most crackpot scheme yet. Okay.
Wait, you're nominating him to be ambassador?
No, he is nominated. He's up to be.
Okay, that's not the crackpot scheme.
But he's embroiled in a scandal because an aide of his apparently harassed both men and women, and with his knowledge and wasn't disciplined. So he is, as we say,
toast. You're holding up a piece of toast. We should say that for our audio podcast listeners, because otherwise they would miss that dazzling visual effect. Folks, it's a piece of toast. It looks so lifelike.
It is a real piece of toast.
That's amazing.
Toast. He's not going to be ambassador to India. So that will open up a new a job for ambassador to India.
Mickey, I am humbled and honored. I'm humbled and I know what you're about to say. No. I'm humbled and honored, but I cannot
You're completely wrong. There's one administration official who, in fact, has Indian heritage, who's very well suited to be ambassador to India, and it would complement. There you go, and that would solve a huge problem for the Democrats.
And she'd be so flattered if you said, instead of being vice president of the United States, how about we send you off to a country?
That's the difficulty in my plan. That's where my plan falls completely to the ground. But since LBJ convinced Justice Goldberg to leave a permanent lifetime seat in the Supreme Court for a temporary appointment as ambassador to the United Nations, anything is possible. Maybe you could work it out where she could be vice president and also be ambassador.
What good would that do?
You just make it clear that she wouldn't run again.
Because
this
what
time,
would the logic be?
That would be the deal. I don't know. I guess that wouldn't work. You would have to make her ambassador to India and have her quit the vice presidency.
And get a new vice president.
A do-nothing job for a serious job, giving her stature on the world stage as a global player.
Mm-hmm. By the way, my crusade to get Chris Murphy to run for president is picking up steam. I just want to report that. And we'll be revisiting that periodically.
Biden had sabotaged Chris Murphy, Bob.
What did he do?
I'm joking, but he gave a speech. Chris Murphy's big thing is he is negotiating the gun control compromise, and it's a very delicate compromise. It's not completely trivial. Manchin is talking about raising the age to buy assault weapons to 21. That's not nothing. It's not almost an assault weapon ban, but it's
but the problem, anyway, the whole assault weapons thing is a little bit of a red herring.
Yeah. Anyway,
but
it's a foot in the door. Okay. And if it passes, then you could do other things. But Biden gave this big political speech where he talked about larger, grander ambitions and put the onus on Republicans. And he politicized it in a way that I actually didn't think was that bad a speech. But all the commentators are saying this makes it much more difficult for Republicans to get on board Chris Murphy's compromise. So Chris Murphy's compromise is more likely to fail now than it was before Biden gave his speech.
So does Murphy's compromise involve the age 21 for assault weapons thing?
Manchin, there are sort of two groups. There's the Murphy group, there's a Manchin group. At some point, they're going to merge. Manchin said that he was open to the age 21 for assault weapons. So presumably Murphy isn't averse to it, right? If he can get, anyway. So he needs Republicans, not just 50 Democrats. He needs 10 Republicans.
I mean, the trouble is that, assault weapons, first of all, they're famously hard to define. Right. Secondly, they're not that different in many ways from just regular semi-automatic rifles. A lot of people think they're like machine guns or something. They're not. They're semi-automatic. You know, you don't have to reload each time you shoot, but you can just fire off successive rounds, and just about any rifle will let you do that. It's a question of magazine size.
The thing that non-gun users or owners don't understand, the biggest thing they don't understand is practically all guns are semi-automatic guns.
Right.
The idea that you have to like reload the bullet in the chamber every time that's very archaic. There are some, but so semi-automatic causes shivers of fear, but it's basically a gun. It means it's a gun.
I'm not sure that's what they think, or they think that assault weapons are automatic. But anyway, both of those things.
Semi-automatic means it's like a machine gun. In fact,
by the way, a friend of mine directed me to something kind of terrifying. There's this Glock pistol that there's just this little thing you have to insert in it to make it automatic. It takes about 2 minutes to do the operation. And, it's part of the design. I mean, and in theory, you're supposed to have to undergo special licensing to be able to own an automatic weapon, which is alarming in itself. I don't think anybody other than law enforcement should have an automatic weapon in any event. But it was amazing. I saw the YouTube of it, and it's like you put this tiny little thing in a Glock pistol that you can get on the market, and God knows how easy it is to move around tons of these tiny little things on the black market, and suddenly it's an automatic. It's an automatic weapon. But there you go.
My position on guns is pretty much the same as Matt Iglesias' I think, which is. It's a compromise. It's a question of how much do you want to intrude on this device that's useful for personal safety versus how do you prevent these mass killings? And I'm coming around to the idea that the guys that do these killings really like assault rifles. And even if they're hard to define, and even if they don't really have many advantages over just a regular semi-automatic rifle, they like them. And that's a good reason to restrict the sale. And so restricting the sale to 21 seems reasonable. Banning them seems reasonable.
But I just want to say that I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure I could successfully make the argument that if you compare banning assault rifles without limiting magazine size to not banning assault rifles, but just limiting magazine size, the latter would be much more effective in reducing the number of people killed. The trouble is, it's just a red herring. People go, so much energy is going into assault weapons ban. It doesn't really address the issue. And of course, gun control isn't the whole issue to begin with. Gun control itself is kind of nibbling around the edges, but you do what you can. And
why wouldn't there be a black market in magazines? There would be, obviously.
Well, there's a black market in anything you ban. I mean, why ban anything? Why ban, heroin? And maybe you shouldn't. I don't know, but of course, that's an issue. But most of some of these people are these, kind of hapless people who, if they couldn't walk down to their local gun shop and buy a gun, they'd be at a loss. I mean, they're not super sophisticated. Sometimes they do it on impulse. They buy the gun.
We're talking about the people that turn into mass shooters, or the vast majority of people who have guns and aren't mass shooters?
I'm talking about the people who murder people. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into this guy who in Tulsa just killed his doctor because he had back pain after surgery and killed several other people. But, that category of people. What an interesting question is.
All I know is he bought the gun that day.
Did he? Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Who knows? Maybe that is a perfect example where the impulse could have passed. I mean, he could have gotten the pain under control. A lot of things could have happened. That is a perfect example of where the black market would not have done the trick. While we're on this, can I just quickly say something I learned about the Uvalde shooting, which maybe everybody already knows, but in terms of this question of how this happened, why the police waited so long. So apparently, whatever police officers in charge of a situation like that, there's a basic designation they need to make. Is it an active shooter situation? or is it a barricaded shooter situation?
Right.
The cop in this case deemed it a barricaded shooter situation. I assume that makes it much less urgent because in the classic barricaded shooter situation, I think the idea is he's not shooting anybody now. It's just that he's holed up and we got to figure out how to get him out. Well, of course, the problem with that is, first of all, a bunch of kids had been shot and were in the process of dying and couldn't be treated until you got cops in there. But the other strange thing is, the Uvalde town police did not have jurisdiction. Technically, the jurisdiction was with the school district police force, which consists of 6 officers. So the officer in charge was one of them, apparently. I gather he made the designation of barricaded shooter. And it could be he wasn't at the scene. I mean, I can imagine a situation where somebody calls him and they just say there's a shooter in the school. Maybe all the initial rounds were fired before any cops got there. So no cops had heard shots. And maybe this guy says over the phone, well, is he shooting? Are there any shots coming out of there? No, I haven't heard any shots. Well, call it a barricaded shooter. I mean, who knows what happened? Certainly, it was still a very long time while parents were, pleading with them to do something and they did nothing. And you got to think, even if this was initially a call made by telephone, the guy would have showed up on the scene sooner or later. So it remains a little mysterious, but I now understand that part of the problem was just this technical call that was made and this strange jurisdictional setup where
it's sort of insane that the police wouldn't have free range to go anywhere.
Well, that's what the Texas state police guy who gave the big press conference said, look, cops are free to, they have a certain amount of discretion. If you're just a patrolman and they're shooting, you are free to, unless there's somebody, maybe if there's a commanding officer holding you back, you don't. But he was saying, just if you arrive on a scene like that, you don't have to wait for orders. But anyway.
It's weird. Uvalde happened like a couple of shootings ago. So it's it always seems like, did we talk about it this week or last week? I guess we did talk about it last week.
A question I might want to talk about in the Parrot Room is, I don't know if I have anything to say, but it's an interesting question is, if you look at these 3 shootings, the Buffalo shooting, racially motivated, the Uvalde shooting, which wasn't, and then this weird Tulsa shooting, are they fundamentally part of the same social pathology? I mean, leave gun control aside and just get back to the question of why there seem to be an inordinate number of people who want to kill large numbers of people. Are these, you know what I mean? Is it the same thing that's wrong in our culture that is responsible for these seemingly diverse?
I saw there's an article probably in Atlantic that attempted to find a common thread. I know nothing about the Tulsa shooter, so I can't generalize it. None of these kids seem to have fathers. I don't know if this Tulsa guy was a kid. What I wanted to say is that Murphy's
I don't think so. Back pain, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Murphy's bill does not just involve the assault weapons. It's a red flag and a enhanced background check bill. So it's not. It's very, very mild, but it's some indication that they want to just get something done as a sort of to show it can be done. The other thing is, of course, the Republicans basically are mainly worried that Schumer will revive some form of Build Back Better in a negotiation with Manchin, and it'll involve big tax increases on the rich, which they don't want, and mainly it will give Biden a win before the midterms. The big thing the Democrats have to do is if they don't act, the enhanced Obamacare subsidies are going to lapse. So Obamacare is going to become just as expensive as it was before, and it's going to be a big shock to people right before the midterms. So the longer the Republicans can tie up everybody in this gun control, negotiations, the less time Schumer has to cut a deal with Manchin. The Republicans are basically running out the clock, which I always thought was a ridiculous idea. until we ran out the clock on immigration reforms. So it can be done. The clock does run out. So it's not clear that it may be, Biden supposedly doesn't think there's going to be a deal. That's why he gave the speech. I thought he tried to thread the needle between encouraging the negotiations and damning the Republicans. But it turns, a lot of people think he shouldn't have damned the Republicans at all if he really wanted a deal. He may want to pull the plug on it quickly in order to get to his big deal with Manchin. The other thing, if you're a worrywart like me and I want Biden to do badly in the midterms, I think he's bottomed too soon. I mean, it's hard to see him going. It's hard to see him going lower than he is now, and there's 5 months till the election, and plenty of time for him to rise a bit. I don't think there's time for him to hold the House, but he could do a lot better than he's doing now, and with the instruction of the filer faster principle, as he has more time than you think.
Well, he could do a lot better than he's doing now and still get shellacked, first of all. Secondly,
right, he's heading for a super shellacking.
Right. But the other thing is he's been plateaued near the bottom for so long. It's just hard to hope for a V-shaped recovery, so to speak. That can't happen. I just think Democrats need to give up on him as a presidential candidate. I mean, the midterms are the midterms, and that's one issue, and his popularity figures into that. I understand, but I think they just need to pick Chris Murphy or somebody else. And remember where you heard the Chris Murphy thing first.
Yeah. I guess he's a better bet than Fetterman at this point.
Well, he hasn't had a stroke that we know of. He hasn't had a
stroke, and apparently Fetterman is not doing as well as one would hope. His doctors still want him to rest. He says he'll be ready in time, but there are all sorts of grave doubts. The Democrats have a long time. They could replace him in September.
Is he still saying it wasn't a stroke?
I think he said it was a stroke. He said it was a stroke caused by AFib. And people think it was a stroke caused by something deeper, some deeper heart problem, and which might cast doubt on his ability to, carry out his term. Apparently, AFib is not nearly as big a deal as this other thing. Okay. So he's fudging that, and Democrats are starting to get very worried. It's too bad. He was a good candidate.
Yeah, that always surprised me. He seemed kind of odd, but I'm happy for him to be a good candidate. I have a question about Biden. Did you read this Michael Powell piece in the New York Times on trans athletes in college?
I didn't. I saw that you recommended it, but I didn't read it.
I thought it was good. But there's this line that I think, if I'm right, he's saying that the Biden administration says transgender girls should be permitted on girls' sports teams. That's an official position of the Biden administration?
I think so, yes.
I wonder about the politics of that. I mean, it's an interesting... I can imagine Republicans in a general election using that to great effect. And I don't know. Maybe it's true that in terms of intra-party politics, Biden needs to go there, but I just got to think among a large majority of the population, this is a losing position. I haven't seen any polling. It's just, and I'm not even passing judgment on the issue myself. I'm just, as I understand human beings and human parents of female athletes and things like that, this is just a loser.
I agree. The Republicans are discovering that beating up on the making a big deal of the trans issue is working for them. It rouses the base, and I guess the Democrats' best hope is that the Republicans will go overboard, which is very easy in terms of trashing trans people, and that it will cause a compassionate backlash. But it's insane. That's the story of the Biden administration, which is, Biden just does what the interest group want him to do. I mean, and he doesn't. There seems to be no check on. He has no control nor does he particularly want to exercise control over what his administration does. I mean, it's always hard to control your administration. The example I've used before is the Mitt Romney administration in Massachusetts handing out a brochure saying it's fun to play with pee. Well, I don't think that was exactly from Romney's Mormon directives. It was just the bureaucracy doing what the bureaucracy is going to do, which is go to the left. That's what's happening here. But I have a unified Biden theory that I think will expand to incorporate this issue. Not quite.
What is this unified
It's in part
Biden?
inspired by a very good article by Bill Scher, former Blogging Heads, current Blogging Heads.
In some sense, yes.
Yeah,
Certainly to be found on the DMZ show.
In the Washington Monthly, which is becoming a very important magazine now that every other magazine has become a unreadable partisan screed.
Well, Paul Glastrus, the editor, is very smart, very good.
But he's been very good for 40 years, and now I think the Washington Monthly is coming in for a second, or third, or fourth, or fifth rebirth.
Bill is also very good and incredibly knowledgeable about American political history.
He wrote a very good article about how the Biden people came in with this idea that Obama had been too soft. He hadn't gone big enough on the stimulus. He tried to compromise with Republicans. They weren't going to make that mistake, Bob. They were going to go big and do it just with Democrats. And, the results has been a disaster. In fact, Biden said, I'm worried, I know that Obama is jealous of my accomplishments. Well, Scher goes through and compares Obama's accomplishments, which are substantial, starting with Obamacare, the stimulus, comparing them to Biden's. There's no comparison. Mm-hmm. So his mistake was going big, and there, you can sort of make that make a little more nuanced. There's apparently blackouts coming this summer, because Biden is he's going big on decarbonization. He's pursuing the phasing out of fossil fuels a little faster than the industry can handle. Everybody's agreed fossil fuels are on the way out, but they just don't have enough capacity to get rid of them as fast as Biden is getting rid of them. And the result is going to be right before the election, people are going to lose their power. Okay, there's a vote getter.
But isn't this the kind of fear that the industry would exaggerate?
Yes.
And aren't you falling prey to this propaganda?
I worry about that, but sometimes the industry is right. The industry was worried about a baby formula shortage too, and sure enough, there was a baby formula shortage, which is getting worse, not better. So the paradigm, and if he's being conned by the industry, if I'm being conned by the industry, then this doesn't fit the paradigm. But the paradigm is Biden goes big, pursuing some long-held Democratic value. He's warned by centrists that this will be a disaster. It runs up against the reality that it is a disaster, and this has happened on inflation, it's happened on immigration, it's happened on crime, it will happen on power, maybe. And then the Biden says, "Oh, it's been a disaster, but we only did it for good reasons." I mean, Cecilia Rouse of one of the top economists in the administration said, "Well, we had inflation, but if that's what it took to help people at the bottom cope with modern life, then yes, we caused inflation." And Ezra Klein said, "Oh, but we had," he's now come around to the view that it did cause inflation, but he said it did all these things that we were longing to do for so long. I mean, it's a case of good intentions running against the reality, against the warnings of centrists, being a disaster. That's happened on virtually every major issue domestically. And it happens on Ukraine too. People are warning centrists. Chris Caldwell had a great article in the New York Times this week. Biden was warned by centrists not to get so heavily involved in Ukraine, but he did the thing his gut told him to do, and the blob, and it could still easily be a disaster.
Well, could be. I mean, I haven't read the Chris Caldwell piece. I've heard about it.
So
what does the disaster Caldwell anticipates?
It's a distillation of your mind.
What disaster does he anticipate? You mean?
I think he anticipates us being drawn into a war. I don't think he anticipates. He's at the line between we just help out our ally and actually getting involved in a war is very porous and gray. I mean, now we're conducting offensive cyber operations against Russia. That's more than just giving Ukraine the tools with which to fight. I mean, we're fighting for them on their side. So that's
interesting. I didn't know. Are we conducting offensive cyber operations?
Yeah, they admitted that this week.
Yeah, I've been trying to stay relatively. I've been trying to stay less immersed in Ukraine. This is my second straight week without consulting my Ukraine list on Twitter. But it does. Well, I mean, first of all, it seems like the mainstream media has now fully come around to a narrative shift, right? It's like now the emphasis is on Ukraine is on their heels, tons of casualties. It's about 180 degrees from where it was 2-3 weeks ago.
Right, but they're anticipating the next shift, which is the Russian offensive runs out of gas and Ukraine gets our weapons and they strike back.
Yeah, well, we've gotten this agreement from them that they won't use these new rockets to attack Russia. We didn't give them the ones that would most terrify Russia, which can go like 180 miles instead of 40. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the same basic rocket, but they're much scarier to Russia. I wonder if Biden is using the threat of those as any kind of. You never know what's being signaled to the Russians behind the scenes, if anything. But, from a strictly game theory point of view, you might be tempted as long as you've got Russia's attention with the rockets we are sending to say, we have no plans to send the ones that go 180 miles. Of course, if Russia went for Odessa or made another play for Kyiv or Kharkiv, we might reconsider, it is real leverage in principle, if you assume it's not such leverage that Putin would totally go around the bend, which would be bad.
Well, there's not a little gizmo that can be inserted in the rocket to turn it from a 40-mile rocket to a 180-mile rocket?
I'm not even sure it's the same launchers. I'm not clear on that, but it's the same kind of thing. It's precision guided, and it's apparently better than what the Russians have.
Why isn't Putin going crazy already? He's supposed to trust Zelensky's promise to Biden that he won't use them against Russia. I mean, I don't think we wouldn't take that we wouldn't go to the bank with that if the shoe was on the other foot.
Well, he is making a lot of noise, and other people in the Russian Overton window defining realm, which is to say, kind of on state TV, are saying, "Okay, this is it. It's now us versus NATO," and they're saying pretty extreme things. But I mean, what's he going to do? Do you think he's going to attack NATO over this? I mean, he really, again, I think
he's going to do whatever Biden was worried that he's going to do if he gives them the 180-mile ones.
Well, no, he would do that if they got the 180-mile ones. Maybe.
What would he do? He would. I don't know.
Well, I think if he sees a real existential threat to his regime, as I've said, like being pushed back beyond or even to the February 24th borders, then you might see very extreme behavior because he might fear that he cannot survive that politically at home. Then you could see a lot of horrible things, and that's why I don't think it's realistic to even push back to the February 24th borders. I will say, if you want to imagine a scenario where the fighting stops fairly soon, here it is, okay? So Russia has got almost all of Luhansk. I mean, they're not proceeding all that swiftly, but it sounds like Ukraine has more or less conceded this city of Severodonetsk, and then there's a sister city to it that I think they've maybe kind of fallen back to. And by the way, I mean, fortunately, so far, their escape route has not been cut off by Russia, it looks like. And so, and it does sound like a retreat may already be in process. And then in any event, that seems like what's in the offing. But anyway, once Russia has Luhansk, then there's one more of the two provinces to go. And I've got to think if the Russian forces are nearly as depleted as they say, and especially if Putin is aware that they're going to get these new rockets in about 3 to 4 weeks, that's when Ukrainians will be trained to use them. If in the course of that period, he took all of Donetsk, which may be a big ask, but if he did, I'm pretty sure he'd be ready to at least stop and talk. And I think it would be easier politically for Ukraine to do that if they have a recent victory under their belt and it doesn't look like they're just on their heels. And the obvious candidate for that is Kherson, the one city where Russians have a presence on the west side of the Dnieper River. And they're, making some kind of counterattack there, the Ukrainians. I think if you're hoping for the fighting to end within a few weeks, the one semi-plausible scenario is as the Russians are taking Donetsk, the Ukrainians are pushing the Russians out of Kherson and back across the river. I think if those two things happen to align, you'd have a pretty good chance for at least a temporary ceasefire.
If it's what you say, I love it.
Yeah, well, it probably won't work out
but it is true that this is a relatively optimistic moment compared with what it would be like if Russia had no victories at all. This is a cynical view, but it seems to me Russia needed to take a chunk of territory in order to be able to stop the war credibly.
Yeah, well, I think Putin feels he needs, at a minimum, those two provinces that he said from the beginning were central to this. He has that in addition to a land bridge, and as Zelensky pointed out, the Russians have about 20% of Ukraine right now. That's a lot.
Yeah. A point Caldwell makes that I didn't quite believe. He points out the how we sponsored a revolution in the Maidan and blah blah. He makes a big deal of that, and then he says, well, and then Russia took Crimea. And most of the West sort of said, well, Crimea, it's a historic Russian port. Of course, they're going to take Crimea. They speak Russian. We're not, but the U.S. actually took seriously the horrible affront, and we need to take back Crimea, and that this was a major way where we were at fault. I didn't realize that we had really actually took seriously the idea that Russia was ever going to give back Crimea.
I'm not aware that many people did. That's mainly come under discussion since the invasion, at least in a prominent way. No, I mean, it isn't just an historic port. I mean, historically, it was part of Russia, but
right.
But it also is the home of the very important naval base that is, I think, the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet. And Russia was not implausibly concerned after the revolution, coup, whatever you want to call it, in 2014, that their rights to a long-term lease of that base were imperiled. Once when the Soviet Union broke up, they did a lease deal with Ukraine, long-term lease, 99 years or something. But there were for that Navy base, which is they consider extremely important. But after 2014, I think there were even Ukrainian politicians talking about taking that away from them. And in any event, Putin saw 2014 as a U.S.-backed coup, and Ukraine's on NATO's membership list. And so it's just not, I think we should have anticipated that he could well go into Crimea. Everyone was shocked, and I certainly wasn't expecting it. I wasn't paying much attention, but in retrospect, it's not that surprising.
Right. Obama kept bringing up Crimea, and that was really annoying because how could anybody take this seriously, that this was our big beef against Putin? But Caldwell implies that it wasn't hollow rhetoric. That actually, I don't know in what sense it wasn't hollow rhetoric, but maybe he's just making a rhetorical point.
Well, there were a lot of hawks, and there were Russia hawks in Obama's administration. McFaul left, I think, shortly, right as that stuff was happening, but right before Crimea, probably.
The key sentence in in Caldwell's piece, which could have been written by you, I think, he's quoting somebody named Mr. Guino. To make concessions to Russia would be submitting to aggression. To make none would be submitting to insanity.
Does he mean now or before the invasion?
Now.
Yeah. Well, you just can't push them out of everything. That is crazy. Yes, you can't get them out of Crimea and so on.
Anyway, so maybe Biden is playing it smart by he at least has some leverage to hold over Putin if Putin decides not to stop and talk.
You mean these longer range missiles?
Yeah.
I think in theory he does. And the game theory question is, should he deliver the message publicly, which in a way gives it more credibility? I mean, in a kind of, oblique way publicly, or privately, or what? But I don't know what they're thinking. What?
Privately, you don't want to humiliate Putin so that if he agrees, he's knuckling under to our pressure.
Well, public always has an upside and a downside. You just listed the downside. The upside is that because you have said it in public, it lends credibility to the threat. It's going to be harder for you to back down, and the other guy knows that. So those are the two sides. I have no view.
It's always possible for Biden to back down. He's Biden.
I don't know. Well, let's see. What is he? Is he a big backer downer? What's he back down?
Yeah, well, he just said Saudi Arabia was going to be a pariah state, and he's jetting there to suck up to MBS in a month or two.
Although that was in the category of campaign pledges, and I think politicians are pretty casual about those. But yeah, it's a bad look. And it's, as I noted, actually, in today's Nonzero newsletter, which is back in action after a 1-month hiatus. It left me tanned, rested, ready. I'll
enjoy watching you deteriorate every week as you get back to work.
And taking advantage of it as you get me to say things,
if I
especially
can,
in the Parrot Room, that I regret.
You seem in a good mood today. It's going to be hard to troll you.
Yeah.
Not that I won't try.
And not that you won't succeed. But no, the point was just that, this is eerily reminiscent of the Cold War in the sense. Okay, so what's going on here is we've got this proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, whose rationale is, to some pretty large extent, that it's part of the war for freedom against tyranny and autocracy and authoritarianism. I mean, that's a lot of the framing of this war. And because of that, we have the oil sanctions on Russia. But to alleviate the political pressure created by the oil sanctions, we have to suck up to this authoritarian autocrat. It's just very reminiscent of the first Cold War, when what we claimed was a global war for freedom led us to support and even install all kinds of brutal dictators. And this is one of the downsides of engaging in a global war against autocracy. It winds up being bullshit.
As you know, I think fondly of the Cold War years. Gene Kirkpatrick, where are you?
Yeah, the Andy Griffith Show. It was a great time, but
I was shocked that for reasons we'll get to. I was listening to an old Virginia Heffernan podcast with Frank Foer about the reaction to his piece inferring that Trump had an insidious relationship with this bank, Russian bank, the Alpha Bank, before the election, and how the left reacted violently against it because the left was convinced that Hillary Clinton wanted to start a Cold War with Russia and that this was part of her insidious blob-like agenda. And these were not leftists who had no power. This is Bernie Sanders. These were people who actually...
Sanders said that?
The Bernie Sanders camp.
Bernie Sanders camp.
knocked.
Well, he had some real lefties. I mean, his foreign policy advisor, Matt Duss, wrote a piece in the New Republic just now saying that the proper left-wing position is to support arming Ukraine. I'm actually going to have Matt on my show in a week.
I just didn't realize the extent to which Hillary Clinton promoting a new Cold War was a thing on the left. It was a thing on the left.
Oh, on the left, absolutely. On the left. I mean, it's all. I mean, Matt was framing his piece against the left, which doesn't want to arm Ukraine at all, partly because it's all this whole proxy war is part of an imperial project. But yeah, Hillary has been considered a neocon on the left. Well, not without some supporting evidence.
Yeah, no, I'd forgotten that. There's some insidious role played by Tad Devine, and I forget. Who is that guy? He's in my Twitter feed. Really? Tad Devine is a longtime Democratic consultant. I remember him at the 1988 convention boasting that he was the guy who gave the order to turn the lights up on Clinton when Clinton was droning on and on with his speech. And
the one where when Clinton was governor and when he said in conclusion, people applauded.
Yes. Maybe he was joking, but he's an important Democratic political consultant who somehow was involved in. If Virginia Heffernan hates him, he must have been somehow involved in a pro-Russia sort of oligarch-like thing. I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, what I remember about the Hillary Frankfurt stuff is that the resistance, not to be confused with the left, just totally glommed onto it, of course, and that is part of what made a subsequent Cold War more likely. The way not the left, but liberals became more anti-Russia.
This is a big topic. Do you want to get into it now or later?
We could. Why don't we? We've been going on a while. Why don't we save it for the Parrot Room? I mean, we should say that a couple of not unrelated things have happened. Well, the main related thing that happened is Michael Sussmann got acquitted, which you were predicting wouldn't happen when we last spoke. Michael Sussmann being the Hillary the Hillary camp lawyer who tried to sell the Alpha Bank story to the FBI and was accused of lying to them in claiming that he wasn't representing Hillary or anybody else.
And this was in taking this Alpha Bank story that Frank Foer wrote about to the FBI. And my theory was, these guys get convicted of technicalities all the time. That's lying to Congress. That's how Oliver North was convicted. Lying to the FBI is how a lot of people get convicted. I'd failed to take into account a DC jury, very democratic. It was loaded with people who were obviously not going to go for this. And B, Sussmann, there was being in the Republican cocoon, I maybe have missed the sense in which Sussmann could have, he could have figured, well, Hillary doesn't really want me to go to the FBI. Hillary wants to get journalists like Frank Foer to write about this. But fuck it, I'm going to the FBI. So there was some evidence for that. And so in that sense, he really wasn't representing the Hillary campaign. He really was doing on his own accord. He was sort of going AWOL. That would raise a reasonable doubt as to whether he was guilty or not.
I think
the second thing is whether a reasonable jury would just say, hey, this is ticky-tack. He really did think Trump was a security threat. And if he lies a little to get to the FBI, fuck it, that's no reason to prosecute him. Which certainly the foreman of the jury said that's what she thought. Or he thought.
Huh. I was going to run by you. I can do it in the Parrot Room. The Ben Wittes defense of Sussmann, which is, I think, more like the first of your theories.
That is the Ben Wittes defense of Sussmann. Anyway, I'm happy to talk about this at length. There's more to talk about. I was wrong in my impulse that he would be convicted. Obviously, they wanted to turn him, put some pressure on him, and then use him, classic prosecutorial fashion, to get some more information on other people. They are good. They're going to try this weird Russian guy who was behind the dossier. I think it's Danchenko. The guy who was introduced to Steele by Fiona Hill, who seems to be the source of all evil in the modern world.
Who was at Brookings, I think, when she introduced him, which in turn brings Strobe Talbot into the picture. How far back can we go with this?
Strobe Talbot's heavily involved, apparently. And Cody Shear, who is an old Clinton operative, sort of. He's like, if you think Sid Blumenthal isn't conspiratorial enough, Cody Shear is your man. And he was, he's the brother of Talbot's late wife. So I was actually at an event where Cody Shear was spinning his conspiracy theories, which are fabulously interesting. And Talbot's wife was like looking at him with disgust, saying, "Why are you so fucking crazy?" The look said, "Why are you so crazy?" Anyway, so yes, Brookings. Who knew?
Yeah, who indeed?
I thought they were just a mild-mannered think tank.
Yeah, I don't think Strobe Talbot would be involved in anything plainly nefarious or like in the sense of illegal, but that's not the claim anyway, I guess.
No, the claim would be that he would be very sensitive to the possibility that Trump would be cozy with Putin, and he'd want to track that down, as am I still. I still think there's a mystery there. I still don't understand why Trump was so averse to saying anything publicly negative about Putin.
Well, speaking of indictments, I just want to say how sorry I am that your friend Peter Navarro is in jail at this moment, Mickey.
He's in jail?
Yeah, he got arrested. He got indicted. And the FBI, I think, took him to actual
being
jail.
Arrested does not mean you're actually in jail.
No, but I saw it reported. I assume it's accurate that they actually, I don't know if they perp walked him, which would have been my own preference, but I think he's, let me see if this has reached the Times. No, of course. How can you in a mere 6 hours get something online in the modern world? I don't see it. Anyway, no, I read that they actually put him in jail. Anyway, the thing is, what's he accused of? He's of course his Trump advisor.
Not complying with a subpoena for the
January 6th.
The January 6th Commission.
Yeah.
It's with the January 6th Commission is going to stage these hearings next week. It's obviously an attempt to revive Democratic hopes for the midterms, which is sort of contrary to the whole thing is they're supposed to be investigating Trump and the threat of Trump, and Trump isn't on the ballot. So obviously, no, they're not interested in the threat of Trump. They're interested in boosting Democrats. So, they were on the verge of actually getting some goods on Trump that sort of got dropped. Wasn't there some, and I forget what it was, there was something where Trump seemed to be egging on the rioters or privately rejoicing at the rioters, or they were actually on the verge of having some goods. So it's not clear that these hearings are going to be a total bust the way the previous Democratic hearings were. Anyway.
I'm not seeing in this Washington Post piece on it that he is in jail. So maybe he's not. I definitely read it, but it was on mere Twitter, so could be wrong. Let's see what else. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, do we have time to talk about more things here, or are we at the stage where we tease
I want to say one thing. We're getting to wrap it up stage, I think, but I want to say, as you know, Mickey, last several weeks in the Parrot Room, I've been discussing this WNYC podcast about a murder that happened not far, a few miles from my house, involving prominent New Jersey political figures, first deemed a murder suicide, now increasingly looks more like a hit job. And finally, this happened in 2014. And finally, the New Jersey Attorney General's office said this week that they are reopening the investigation into the murder. So, Mickey, once again, the Parrot Room gets results. You got two veteran journalists like you and me, and we really put our minds to something, and we get things done. And I just want to take my hat off to us.
You heard it first from me 2 hours before everybody else said the same thing, which is that Peter Thiel is on the verge of having 2 senators.
Actually, by the time you emailed me with the news that the New Jersey Attorney General had done this, I had literally heard it on the podcast. That's how
slow I was. There are 2 sort of earnest, important topics that maybe I could bring up to save the sexy, unimportant topics for the Parrot Room. In the pandemic, it turns out that the Omicron virus is deadlier among old people I was shocked. I was frankly shocked by that.
Wait, deadlier than alternative viruses, or
deadlier than Delta, which was the big deadly wave. It's killing more old people. It's not deadlier among the population at large. But the theory is that because old people, their immunity is waning, the booster campaign is failing, that their death rate is actually almost as high as it was, higher than it was under Delta.
Well, remember,
and
the
as
vaccine,
an over 65,
yeah.
I found that troubling.
The vaccine was built for Delta. It was not as effective against Omicron.
But that's that's a good point that they didn't make. They didn't make that point. They made the point that Biden administration, it's another Biden administration fuck up. The campaign, both to get the old people to take the booster, is in chaos. It's not working. It's stalled. My doctor actually advised me not to take the booster.
Did he? Well, you have a bizarrely high antibody level.
I had a high antibody level. It might mean I have already had the virus, or it might mean that for some reason the last booster worked. But in general, with the people who maybe need it, it's not easy to get the booster the way it was easy to get vaccinated. And the second thing is there's this antiviral, which Gavin Newsom boasted about. Thank God for the antivirals. Well, it's easy for Gavin Newsom to get the antiviral. Apparently, it's not that easy for ordinary Americans to get the antiviral. So two more fuck-ups by Biden. We got the baby formula. We got he's elected to stop the pandemic. Okay, he's fucking up with the pandemic, possible fuck up with blackouts. It's a litany of failure, Bob.
Let's don't get ahead of the game. Let's wait till a blackout happens to blame it on him, okay?
How about crime? Could we blame him for crime? Sort of. Not really a federal issue, but anyway.
A lot going on there. It started before he was president, right? The uptick. By the way, as far as, some good news for him, I think, is this Wall Street Journal headline from today. Exactly what you want to hear if you want a soft landing that keeps inflation at bay. The headline is, economy extends hiring streak, with hint of a cooling.
Yeah, that was very Goldilocks-y.
Goldilocks.
I agree. That seemed good. The problem is that, it's in part because of Biden that we're in this dilemma where we're hoping for a Goldilocks.
He had the misfortune. He did a stimulus like Trump and had the misfortune that his immediately preceded spike in inflation. But
the idea, but it goes to what Bill Sherrod says. It's worse than Bill Sherrod. He was, Trump's stimulus, that couldn't be enough because he's Trump and I'm the anti-Trump. So I have to have my own stimulus, okay? And by the time the stimulus passed, it was clear, for one thing, that all this money that they were sending to state and local governments was not needed and was just, and so they could have cut that part out. It would have been less inflationary. But no, Nancy Pelosi wanted it. So Governor Newsom has so much money, he's sending checks around gratuitously to random Californians to try to spend the money that Pelosi sent him.
Wait, what did I read about her husband? Is he in trouble?
Yeah, he got arrested for DUI. Or he got charged with DUI. He ran into somebody. Didn't seem obvious that it was his fault, but I guess the cops took a blood test and decided. It's very easy to get over the limit now.
What's the limit in California?
I forget. It's so low that my friends tell me don't
0.07 or something?
It's 2 drinks. It's basically 2 drinks. One of the things I admired about Kiefer Sutherland was he got busted for DUI. He went to jail. It wasn't his first time. He didn't kick up a fuss. He went to jail, served his time, and got back out.
Mickey, the last Howard Johnson's in America has closed.
I know. I saw that.
Did it make you sad?
No, because I was never a Howard Johnson's person to begin with.
But still, you know what it represented, right? You can imagine being in one even if you've never been in one.
Yeah, no. I lament the loss of what it represented. Having been forced to eat a Burger King Whopper on the road and resulting in 4 days of intestinal illness. I can say that I would have liked the Howard Johnsons, but I wouldn't have gone to Howard Johnson's in the pandemic anyway. So
you have not made a firm causal link between the Burger King and your...
I felt bad 20 minutes after I ate it. So there's a firm causal link in my mind.
That's probably too soon.
I'm very sensitive, Bob.
Speaking of libelous claims, well, we can talk about this in the Parrot Room, but Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, our attention was initially forced toward this case by somebody in the Parrot Room. So we can talk about that there.
I'm ready to talk about that in the Parrot Room. Are we on the Parrot Room?
I think so. We're at
Pumping.
like 55 minutes. I think we're 56 minutes. I think we're heading toward the exits, waving to well-wishers.
Okay.
Encouraging them to follow us into the patreon.com/Parrot Room. Begging them to follow us.
I'm ready to talk about Depp-Heard. I'm ready to talk about Frank Four and whether there is anything but to this Alpha Bank scandal. Bizarrely, the answer is not clearly no. I'm ready to talk about the what's up with Tucker's son. There's some unnamed scandal involving Tucker's son, which seems I'm in general on his side, but I don't quite understand. There's some deal with Tucker's son that I don't quite understand.
We'll try to get to the bottom of it in between now and.
We won't get to the bottom of it, but we'll clarify the weirdness of it. There's Sheryl Sandberg leaving Facebook. Is she going to run for office? There is a link between the possible replacement for Ron Klain, between her and Harvey Weinstein. That's not good. There's Ann Coulter starting a Substack to compete with us. She charges money for it, Bob.
She and I target the same demographic. This is going to be, this could get ugly.
But she and I have a little overlap, Bob.
You do. You should feel threatened, Mickey. I
don't have a podcast that big. I guess I do have a podcast that charges money. Freddie deBoer, a man of the moderate left, has been Ben Smith. We'll discuss what that means.
Yeah, I'm curious. I didn't know about that. He's been on my show.
The other worthy topic that I didn't bring up is in Ellis's news items last week. It implied that there was an actual split brewing in the Chinese hierarchy. There's a guy who's not Xi, but has some other name. I think it's Li, who's running around saying, "Oh, we're friendly to business. What Xi did was too much," and so there's a policy split, and they haven't swatted down this guy yet. So it might be a important division brewing in the most important country in the world.
If it's what you say, I love it.
You do love it? Aren't you for stability?
What?
Aren't you for stability?
Well, I would like somebody a little less hard line than Xi Jinping and somebody a little more willing to compromise for the sake of commercial relations.
Okay.
But we'll see. So,
and the other thing I had is, why are so many people saying they're non-binary? And should we straight male geezers be alarmed by this abrupt shift in the polls?
Or should we just go with the flow? I mean, who knows? You and I could have a very interesting announcement in the Parrot Room. Not this week, though. It's something I would want to think about carefully.
You are wearing a plaid shirt that's sort of like the guys in that horrible movie that I didn't like.
Could you be a little more specific?
What was that movie? It didn't win the Academy Award. The one because I Can't Quit You.
Oh, Brokeback Mountain?
Brokeback Mountain. You're wearing a Brokeback Mountain shirt.
Well, they're not non-binary. For God's sake, Mickey, don't embarrass yourself among the woke.
Why aren't they non-binary?
Non-binary doesn't just mean gay, does it?
Right. Heath Ledger had sex with his wife and with Jake. So that
but
seems
I think, now I'm going to embarrass myself, but I think non-binary is more subtle than that. I mean, I think like he would say, I'm a man, definitely. And sometimes I have sex with men, sometimes with women. I don't think that's non-binary. I think non-binary is saying I'm not just a man or just a woman. This is why people like you and me at our age, we don't even have the cognitive capacity to process this stuff. This is subtle. It's subtle.
That's an interesting point in which I may have gotten it completely wrong, but
I may have. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Neither of us has the brain cells to figure this out.
Kids these days think non-binary means not just that I'm a little bit gay, but I'm a little bit trans.
Kids these days think whatever they say about this is the truth, Mickey. They're the ones saying it. The question is what we think and are we wrong?
When they say I'm non-binary, they mean I'm a little bit trans.
I'm not even going to put words in their mouth except to say that I don't think non-binary means the same as bisexual. And have at me if I'm wrong, folks. I'm doing my darndest to keep up with these darned kids.
Well, that would be an important innovation. Anyway, we can talk about this.
Okay, so aside from that, in the Parrot Room, I'm going to say a little more about Dead End. There's actually a development beyond the mere state attorney general investigating this murder involving some extremely powerful folk in New Jersey politics. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Ukraine war spin. Some might say propaganda. I want to bring the BBC into this picture, along with, of course, the Institute for the Study of War, my go-to propaganda source, and the go-to source for the New York Times, Washington Post, and I noticed this week the Wall Street Journal. Sadly, I want to mention a TV show I really like called Undone. Are you aware of this on Amazon?
No, I'm still stuck on Severance, so I'm happy to switch from Severance to Undone.
Mickey, God, there's no hope for you. I can see you not liking Station 11. I wasn't in love with that, but if you don't like Severance, did you see your friend Peter Blake, who knows Hollywood like you and I don't, was raving about Severance on Twitter?
No, I didn't.
Doesn't that make you ashamed for just not even getting it?
It does. It makes me feel not with it, but
have you
Severance is getting better. Severance is getting better.
Oh, so you have been watching it?
I progressed one more episode.
And
the audience is not interested in my plotting progress through Severance. I'm ready to switch to something else.
No, but there is one question on their mind. Are you continuing to fall in love with Helly?
Helly wasn't really in this last episode so much. But yes, of course.
But she was in your heart, Mickey. She was in your heart. Now
I wanted more Helly.
Who didn't want more Helly?
Helly isn't playing as big a role in the show as her hotness would require. I assume she plays a bigger role in the future.
On balance, she plays a reasonably prominent role, enough to keep guys like you watching, Mickey.
Okay.
Non-binary. I mean, non-binary.
I've been having problems. Anyway, yes. Go ahead. That's fine.
So we can say maybe we'll talk a little about Severance, but I like this Undone thing. I'll say a little about it, encourage you to watch it. You mentioned we can talk about the Michael Sussmann thing and the Ben Wittes take on it.
And the Alpha Bank.
Alpha Bank. We're going to talk about these things. Let's see. Damn it. Is there anything else?
Why?
By the way, I was on Andrew Sullivan's podcast. If there's anybody who is not sufficiently familiar with my views on Ukraine, your ship has come in.
You didn't talk about trans issues?
We did not. It dropped today. You, of course, were on his podcast many months ago. You were much higher on his list than I was. But, I've reconciled myself to my relative
He
status.
knew I was easier to get.
No. He didn't seem too nervous about whether I'd say yes.
He's sort of a go-to guy on trans issues.
He has very clear views.
Yes, that's what I meant.
So
harder for the woke to take out. Put it that way.
Oh, I honestly don't think they probably consider him much of a challenge. I don't know, but I mean, from their point of view, they're the ones who define taking out. But I don't think they're intimidated.
60 Minutes does a segment on him. I think they would rather have a world where
these
60
people,
Minutes.
The woke have never heard of 60 Minutes, Mickey.
My God, Bob, that's the theme. The theme of this week is how out of touch we are.
No, how out of touch you are. I keep explaining things to you about the woke.
You weren't sure about this non-binary business, Bob. You didn't have the indicia of confidence.
Being humble.
You have indicia of confidence. You're the one with daughters, so.
Correct. And they have explained some of this stuff to me.
Okay.
Most of which I've forgotten because of my age. Okay, so that's it.
Pretty convenient.
Next up is parrotroom.com.
I think we should start
patreon.com/parrotroom. Yeah.
Biden started, his pollsters came up with the idea that MAGA polls so badly that you should accuse the Republicans of being ultra MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
And then according to a recent article, the lawyers in the White House said that was too political. So cabinet officials couldn't say ultra MAGA on taxpayer funded premises or use it in work time. It was too politicized, so they couldn't say ultra MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
But then it didn't work anyway because the Trump people embraced it, saying yes, we are ultra MAGA, and they started offering a special funding tier for ultra MAGA people. So I think we should start a special tier for ultra parrot. Ultra parrot.
I think maybe we should go with ultra MAGA. You have certainly attracted a few of those to the audience in the Parrot Room. I think we should have both an ultra MAGA tier and an ultra parrot tier.
I think we've soothed the waters, Bob. I think those people are now beloved members of the
chastised
parrot community.
Okay, we will see you there.